right, good morning, y'all. Hello. Love hearing the enthusiasm at 9 a.m. Who doesn't love talking about data and BEAD right at the top of the hour? Thank you, all of you for joining us today. Thank you so much to NCOMPAS for pulling together a great event as always. My name is Kathryn DeWitt. I'm the project director for the Broadband Access Initiative at the Pew Charitable Trusts. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience today. So NCOMPAS is not pulling any punches. They started you off with AI, and now we're moving on to data mapping and BEAD. So we will jump right into the discussion, but before we do, I'd love to have my panelists introduce themselves. Amanda.
Hi, my name is Amanda Martin. I'm the Policy Director with the Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth at NTIA, helping support all of the bipartisan infrastructure law programs.
And good morning. I'm Scott Woods, President of Public-Private Partnerships with Ready.net, a software and technology company, and I run the DC office.
I'm Ed Bartholme. I'm the Senior Outreach Director for the FCC's Broadband Data Task Force, and I also work as a Deputy Bureau Chief in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau at the FCC.
I'm Sally Doty. I am the Director of BEAM, which is Broadband Expansion and Accessibility of Mississippi.
All right. So also just looking to the event organizers, confirming we should be using the mics, and great. Okay, so we're going to pass around and I'll be good friends with that. Okay, so we are, as everyone mentioned and I mentioned, talking about data mapping and BEAD implementation this morning. I think what I would just kind of like to frame the conversation with the perspective that y'all are lucky because of the perspectives that you have on this panel right here. You have the federal perspective, you have the state perspective, and also everyone who is working with local officials. And as someone who sits at the Pew Charitable Trust, we work with 35 state broadband offices to help them prepare to implement all these federal funds. We work with all the other states across the country as well. I think what is so exciting, but also so challenging about this moment is that we have set new, good national standards on data collection and mapping. But the question of implementation and how that ties to funding is difficult. And it's difficult for all the reasons that the progress that we have made in data and transparency, which is local and state engagement. So please just get ready for a good conversation because all these folks are going to dig into that. So Amanda, I'm going to start with you. Can you explain where we are with BEAD at the moment? We've heard a lot about the FCC's map and the challenge process in the last year. So why are states readying challenge processes now?
That's a great question. I know everybody has had so much fun with the FCC's challenge process that it's like, why wouldn't we have another one?
The shudder just went through the room.
I think this really goes back to the fact that BEAD is truly a unique program. It's unlike any other program that we've ever had before to make these kind of investments. And it really goes back to the statute. When the statute was written, it actually creates a state-run challenge process. And so we have made huge steps forward with the FCC's national broadband map, and we have more granular data than we've ever had before. But the BEAD challenge process is really about allowing each state and territory to run its own process, its own one-time process to further refine that data to make sure that as we're making this once-in-a-generation investment, that we're making it in the right places, that we have really identified what the and underserved locations are as we are making these investments. It's really important to note that each eligible entity gets to design and implement its own process. So NTIA is providing oversight of that process. We want to make sure that in running this process that we are getting to a more accurate map, not a less accurate map, and that we are really able to help drive these investments to the places that need them most.
So what I'm hearing from that, Ed, is that the FCC, the map, no more, right? We don't really, it's done. Okay, all right. Yeah. In all seriousness though, I mean, to Amanda's point on getting to a more accurate map, can you talk to folks in the room really about why it's still so important to continue engaging with the FCC in your data collection process?
Definitely, and I can start by saying it's required. Right. So there are rules. You have to do this every 6 months. Last Friday was the deadline to file your as of December 31st, 2023 availability data. And we're going to do it again this summer. every 6 months, just like the statute tells us to do. But I think an important reason to be participating and to continue to participate is having your data on the map, having your locations marked off can help prevent you from being overbuilt through federal funding or state funding programs. There are opportunities along the way for states to resync to the map, choose a version of the map that they're going to start with for their state challenge process. So those inflows of your new availability data, as well as results of the challenge process and other tweaks that we make to the map with locations, all still matter and all still play a part in BEAD planning, but also other funding programs. Reconnect is, has a new round, and that's using data in the map and the broadband funding map to inform some of its decisions as well.
Thank you. And you're spot on about Reconnect. Thanks for bringing that up. I know that that's an active conversation with states right now as they're trying to reconcile, again, just trying to figure out what locations are served and unserved. So Sally, let's talk about the state perspective. Where are y'all with BEAM right now? And if you could you talk a little bit about the work y'all have done with local leaders and community members to ready them for the challenge process?
So we have submitted our initial proposal, as all states have, and are waiting on approvals for that. And once we get approval, we can run our state challenge process. So to prepare for that, we have been working around the state. We're going to work through our planning and development districts around the state. We have 10 around the state to make that into a manageable process. It's so important to get the information out there. This challenge process is not easy. And of course, in addition to providers, it is for local governments and also nonprofits. There is, with our local governments, they're trying to get the trash picked up and keep the water on. So when you talk to them about participating in a broadband challenge, their eyes glaze over, they want to do it, but they simply do not have the capacity. So we're going to work with these targeted districts that are used to working with these individuals. They know where the pain points are. A lot of communities, sometimes it's the communities that need help the most that really cannot participate. And so we are looking forward to that. We have a lot of eyes on us. As was evidenced by a press conference with about 100 people. It's a lot of advocacy groups at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago. And so the answer to their concerns about transparency is data and having good data. That's what we strive to do in Mississippi. We've worked very hard on our map to make it very easy to understand and would invite all of y'all to go see our Mississippi BEAD map. We're proud of it.
And it is a remarkable it's a remarkable map, and the progress I think that BEAM in particular has made in the last 2 years. Sally, how long have you been in the role? Is it
18 months.
18 months. Okay.
Yes.
So it is really incredible to see how states like Mississippi and others have really pulled together and come around this, not only standing up an office to implement several sources of federal and state funding, but also then to be on the ground in the way that they are. And in some cases, like Mississippi, they're working with companies like Ready.net to do that. So Scott, can you talk a little bit about what, what your company does and also the role that you are playing in the challenge process?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a software and technology company. We have the pleasure of working with over 20 states, including Mississippi, in part to develop a platform to enable them to adhere to all of the requirements of the challenge process. But that's internal. And then external, a portal to ensure that Sally and other state broadband office directors can effectively communicate with all of the stakeholders that they engage with, the operators, their internal stakeholders, right? Let's not act like politics or administrative issues don't play a part in this, be beholden, and then the community, and ensuring that we have the most accurate data and up-to-date information so that Sally and other SBO directors can effectively communicate the progress that's being made. I don't want to underestimate this. Like, we're here in Washington, D.C., and those of us who've worked in policy for a while, we throw these out and it's like, oh, yeah, this should be easy, and this NTIA requirements and this. But outside in the community, it's really difficult. It's difficult for them to understand the policy impacts, the reasons why certain decisions are made. And because this program is so reliant and intensive on data and data collection and mapping, we found that working, hand in hand with our states to ensure that they have the most up-to-date information and are always collecting more data and information so that they can stay on top of being able to communicate where they are in their programs effectively. And I want to plug just one more thing. We're not just working with states in the challenge process. We've expanded our platform to work also in the grant administration as well as automated reporting and compliance. Because again, as Amanda said, this program, like any other, is so reliant on data and information, not just with the FCC fabric map, and yes, it's not perfect, surprise, but also with the data that's required for states to submit to NTIA on a continuous basis.
Scott, just following up on that point a little bit, can you shed any light at this point on the differences, or Amanda, on the differences between what states are collecting now versus what they'll be reporting into NTIA?
Yes. So states right now are collecting a lot of granular data, not just broadband availability, but speed test data, community anchor institution data, multiple dwelling unit data, and a lot of information, demographic information in the community. So we're processing a lot of data and information to submit to NTIA on the challenge process. And that is going to essentially tell the states where their eligible and ineligible areas are. And that's going to guide the administration of the allocation that each state received in their NTIA grant fund. So all states are different. Some states have more data, some states have no data at all. But again, they are beholden to federal and local officials and stakeholders and the operator community, as Sally can attest to. I've ridden with Sally all around Mississippi, as she knows every community in Mississippi like the back of her hand. And she is responsible for effectively communicating not only what BEAM is doing, but it's the credibility for the NTIA and the FCC, in that being able to communicate effectively of where the process is, where the next steps are, garners support that we can actually solve the digital divide with this effort. So it is definitely a collaborative approach, but again, it is so reliant on data and information that has never been effectively done before with broadband and broadband industry.
Yeah, I'll just mention that Scott talked a lot about kind of data that we're collecting now. I think it's also important to think about the data we will be collecting. So NTIA will be collecting data from the states, who will be collecting from the grantees to make sure that this money is doing what it was supposed to do. We're also it's really important to continue to be reporting to the FCC's map. So I think while we're doing this one-time BEAD challenge process to really make sure we're investing in the right place, the FCC's national broadband map is the source of truth for, will be the source of truth for broadband service going forward. And so I think it's important to be able to have the data in all of those different places.
Let me put a finer point on that, and to say that all of this data is being crosswalked. So states are working with their federal counterparts to say, this is what we have, what do you have? And that is being updated. Ed mentioned this earlier, it's being updated right now. It's being updated frequently. There are constant and continual conversations between these levels of government to ensure that the left hand is talking to the right, and that states are making the most informed decisions possible that they can. So that is why that engagement at both levels is really essential. So Ed and Amanda, can y'all talk a little bit about how some of these changes in federal standards with data, with mapping, are they affecting funding implementation at this point? Are they affecting the way that y'all are thinking about program administration? And Ed, I'm going to punt to you first.
No, and I think they definitely are. And granularity is the key, right? It's been mentioned a few times already on the panel. It takes a lot of work to achieve it, but it's constantly getting better. To Scott's point, we may not have a perfect map yet, but we keep working on the map, right? And I know, right? But it's, you know, it's an evolving data set and it'll continue to improve. I think the other important thing is we have a lot of new tools that we've never had before, right? The challenge process that we ran leading into the BEAD allocation saw very robust participation. We've been doing extensive verification work, right? So that's outside of the challenge process where we're in contact with providers. Some of it's just helping people understand the rules of a brand new data collection and the types of things that you're supposed to be reporting to us. At the end of the day, better data is what's key to making more informed funding decisions and ensuring that everybody has a chance to get connected.
Agree with all of that. I think the ability to be able to make funding decisions on a more granular level than we've ever made is allowing us to target funds to the right places. I think the other benefit that we're seeing is that we're speaking the same language about when we're talking about locations and service availability. So having this shared fabric that we're using across all of these different locations to be able to kind of to talk very specifically about each individual location, it really gives us an ability to coordinate and align funding in a way that we haven't been able to do previously.
And from a state level, it is so important to have that state broadband office that is looking at the state as a whole and that is familiar with all of the communities in the state. You know, we spend a lot of time looking at that map and, you know, one day we were looking at it, we're looking over in the Delta and there's this tiny town that showed that it had fiber and was served. And, you know, my coworker and I were like, how in the world did that happen? You know, it was just a mistake. And so from a state level, we're able to look and spot some problems and identify that. And so we make sure that our map is correct for our funding decisions that we will make.
I think that point on consistency and again, information sharing is really important because I know that I work with a lot of state legislators as well, and there is a lot of confusion about what's reconnect versus what's E-rate and wait, you know, can you explain what RDOF is? And so creating consistency to the extent possible, it's one step at a time, y'all, let's be clear about that. But creating consistency and starting with data and awareness on served and unserved, I think has been a really powerful tool for public education and public engagement. And I think that that's also been one of the benefits of the challenge process, at least from where I sit and working with policymakers in Congress and in states. You got somewhere to point them. They're like, I have angry constituents yelling at me. And you're like, there is a challenge process. Please encourage them to participate. Scott, with respect to this question on, you know, funding implementation and public engagement, you kind of mentioned this earlier and so did Sally, but anything else you want to add about that public engagement process?
It is very important. Number one, that you can't manage it by static PDFs and Excel spreadsheets, right? Let's be honest, right? It's a lot at stake. It's confusing at sometimes. Iterating guidance from the NTIA as well as the FCC that we have to work with our state partners to ensure that they understand the requirements. And our particular approach is, you know, geospatial workflows to get really technical, but it does allow for state broadband offices, again, to point to a public portal or a public process that ensures that, you know, participants are not only involved in the stakeholder engagement process, but reflected, right? So the challenge process isn't perfect. Right now, we're seeing primarily providers are participating, but not communities, not anchor institutions, right? So that tells the broadband offices that more outreach has to happen, has to occur on the local government level in communities, right? With anchor institutions to get them involved in the challenge process. So this data is iterating, and any state broadband office can tell you, trying to manage it the way we did, for example, when I was at NTIA in the BTOP program, you know, with spreadsheets and PDFs and old stale KMZ files on a Google Earth map is not going to be the best use of funds. So that, again, that we make sure that the funds are going exactly into the communities that need them and to the operators who are going to you know, utilize the funds and build and do what they say they're going to do. So it is a collaborative process, but that data processing, that data collection, but the outreach and engagement is continuous, and it's so important because every time a new challenge process or new data is available, SBOs are going to, directors have to be accountable internally to their teams, but more importantly, externally to all of their stakeholders.
Well, and it's also about advocacy of funding, right? And understanding and anticipating future needs. I mean, with CAIs in particular, we all know that CAIs play a critical role in connectivity and ensuring that folks have skills access when they don't have a home access. But we need to understand what future costs will look like and how we promote digital literacy and the role of CAIs in that. So, this isn't just about BEAD and decisions that are going to be made over the next year. This is about really looking forward and being able to project and anticipate what those needs may be. Speaking on the point of coordination, let's talk about everybody's favorite subject in Washington, which is interagency coordination. Ed and Amanda, it's working. There are MOUs in place. But Ed and Amanda, thank you. Sorry, some people, okay. It's early to be making jokes about that. But Ed and Amanda, can y'all talk a little bit about the interagency coordination the FCC and NTIA are doing and perhaps a success story?
I guess I'll go first on this one. I think that our level of coordination has really increased. We have, I get to spend time with Ed every week. We have a lot of ongoing conversations. And I think one good success story coming out of this was as the national broadband map was first rolled out, we were able to get on the phone with a number of state broadband offices. So we had state broadband offices, NTIA, and the FCC all represented on calls. This allowed us to look at things that were being seen in the map. And sometimes it was about explaining how the map was working or how the underlying data works or how the challenge process works. Sometimes there was a mistake in the map. This was a new process for a new reporting protocol for all of the providers. And so kind of being able to get all three of those groups together in multiple situations really helped us be able to kind of continue to move those maps forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just echo, to Amanda's point, I think it extends well beyond the parameters of an MOU. I mean, there were stretches of time where there were 3-time-a-week meetings to talk through things that we were seeing, to triage quickly. There have been instances where NTIA, who is also working very closely with this data set, has discovered, hey, there's a provider who's got a fiber network and they're reporting themselves as high latency. That doesn't seem to line up. Let's talk to that provider and figure out what's going on there. To Sally's point, states see things. I think we got a call not too long after you discovered that tiny town that was lit with fiber to talk through, is this an error in somebody's reporting? South Carolina, I know Jade from Kansas is in the room today too. Everybody's reached out and said, hey, this doesn't align with some of the things I'm collecting through my state reporting processes or just know to be the truth on the ground. And going back to that idea about the common language, to Amanda's point, having all of the agencies and everybody sort of focused on outreach and engagement with singular terms and a singular direction to point people in, I think that was incredibly helpful in moving quickly from, we called it a pre-production draft. And we went from that to an allocation in a very short period of time because of the fact that we were also heavily engaged in working together to get it right and making sure people understood the processes.
And it's not easy to do. So I commend y'all for doing that and for making the progress that you have. Sally, on the point of interagency coordination, what does that look like at the state level right now?
So we appreciate you taking our calls and working through those issues, but we're also looking ahead as to implementation. And as these funds are deployed, what can we do as a state office to help that move faster? So we're in the process also of working with Capital Projects Fund, which is ARPA funding. We have a broadband infrastructure program grant that our office is administering, and we have noticed a pain point within our state on SHPO approvals, state historical approvals. And so we are going ahead and working with our state archives and history. We know they have a difficult staffing issue. It's difficult for them to make the decisions in a timely manner. So we're going to use some grant funding to have a liaison to their office to help us work with it. So it's been great to get that into place. We're going to do that with CPF and then roll it right into BEAD. I think this room would appreciate one of our providers, the first, you have to, if you have an area where you're building out in a culturally sensitive area, they give you a plan for what you have to do to satisfy. And this one particular provider was doing 40 miles of fiber and was required to run, let's see, he was supposed to dig an 18 by 18-inch hole every 100 feet for that 40 miles was the first pass he got from our original Archives and History. I mean, it would have added a year, $1 million to the project, and our agency was able to come in and talk through that. So to prevent burdensome regulations, make everything move faster, we're going to do that and are looking for ways to do that with other state agencies as well as we see these pain points come up.
So just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, y'all are dedicating funding to add staff to another agency to help alleviate.
Yes.
Okay, wow, that's great. I know some other state, I'm saying this, like some other states are doing that too. So it's exciting to hear y'all have chosen to use funds in that way. Scott, let's talk a little bit about P3s for a second and public-private partnerships. You've worked on the public side, you're working on the private side. We all talk about the importance of P3s. I think very rarely folks actually discuss what it takes for them to be successful. Any perspective on that?
I mean, in this context, it's really about collaboration. I'll give you a real world example. I know Sally can speak to, Jade as well. I've been there with them. The first time they roll out and they stand up in front of a stakeholder meeting and they roll out a map, does anyone know what the first thing that people in the room, whether they're operators or community members or local government officials, what the first thing they do? Anyone knows?
Where's my house? What's
They
my
go
address?
Exactly to they go exactly to their address or their mother's address. And if that data is not right, or if they want to dispute it,
The whole map is wrong.
Yep.
Map is wrong.
Yep.
Because my mother lives there and I know she doesn't get fiber, right? Or I know that she doesn't get whatever's being portrayed on the map. So again, we can talk about, the collaboration. It's going to take collaboration with the operators and state government and the federal government in a way that our industry just doesn't do and hasn't done, but needs to do if we're going to effectively use this opportunity and this historic funding to make the impact that we want, which ultimately is about improving connectivity in unserved and underserved communities, right? And getting anchor institutions the needed connectivity that they need. Now, I'm a different perspective because I was at NTIA when this started, and then I left and on the private. Now I'm working with states and communities and still with the federal government, working with the federal government as well. But the level of collaboration that is going to be required, I'm telling you right now, is something unlike we've ever witnessed in the broadband industry. And if you are a provider, unless you are a small provider, you will have to adjust your business models and your ROI to accommodate, the demand points and the processes that are needed. And if you're really serious about solving the digital divide and really looking towards where we want to be in the future, it's no one that you shouldn't work with. It's going to take everyone to come around the table and coalesce around a set of principles and points to ensure that we can get this done. And I want to say it's not going to be easy. Like, we sit up here from a policy perspective and it sounds great, but doing it every day is extremely hard. And if I could curse, I would say, this crap is going to be, this is really hard. So it's really hard to do, but we're invested in it. We're invested with our partners. We once you go out into the community and you see the operators who are there and you see the local officials at every meeting they go to, they hear how they need improved broadband. If you go with the directors and you hear the feedback that they receive, again, we're fired up to ensure that we can bring more partners to the table to ensure, that we can help them be successful. And it's ultimately where we want to go, not just where we want to get to. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it's good. No, I agree. Keep the shared goal in mind. So with that, we are almost, we're at time, but I'm going to give Sally, Ed, and Amanda one piece of advice for the providers and other entities who are in the room right now. What do they need to do if they are not already preparing for the challenge process in states? What do they need to do? One thing.
Oh, let's let Amanda go first.
My one thing is that you have to engage with each state or territory where you have an interest. So each process is going to look a little bit different, and you have to engage with each one.
My piece of advice is to call the broadband office and talk to people at the broadband office, not the governor's office.
And
That's very good advice. Y'all should follow it.
And I will keep us on a uniform message. If you have a pot of federal funding and are currently building out or getting ready to deploy, talk to your state broadband office. Communicate. Let them know what your timing is, what your plans are. We've reiterated this to our awardees. I know other agencies with funding out there are focused on this too. States have a tremendous amount of work ahead of them, and the more information they have, the sooner they get it, the better we can all plan for what's next.